Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 2B, and we are on class 16. Today we're going to look at A20, 21, 22, and 23, which sounds like a lot, but they're actually really short assignments that are kind of all related about textbooks. And then we're also going to look at comparative and superlative adjectives. And as always, I am Jillian Percy. All right, whenever you hand in work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way the secretary can log that you submitted the work. Please include your full name, course name, assignment number, and name. And if an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which is which and include them both in the same email. If you want to talk to me today while I'm on the radio, 1-800-465-7144. We are on the radio at 91.9. We are also on Zoom. If you ask me for the link, I can send it to you. The office is not really open right now, but 1-800-667-3703. The secretary is there till about 4:30 most days. I'm here from 12 on. You can fax in work, 1-800-463-7852. And if you have a question about the course or anything going on, please send it to me at julian.percy@nnecschools.org. I have the same address for Facebook and YouTube, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. On YouTube, we have all the previous recordings of this class. This class has run 4 times this year. So if I have not yet gotten to the assignment that you are working on right now, just go back and look at one of the previous terms and you will be all set to look at things. I wouldn't look at term 1A. It's my very first term, but term 1B or term 2A are both really strong, I think. All right, today's work. Today we're going to be looking at how to use comparative adjectives, how to use superlative adjectives, understanding textbook features, applying our understanding to locate these features in a textbook, using skimming and scanning techniques to read a textbook, and then understanding visuals such as graphs in a textbook. Okay. Comparative adjectives, understandably, are used when you compare two things to each other. For example, my son is taller than my daughter. So you're comparing the son to the dollar and you're saying daughter, not dollar, and saying that the son is taller than. Okay. For regular comparative adjectives, we just add er to the end of the main adjective, right? Tall is the main adjective. We just added which kind of is like a little signal in English that you're comparing two things. For longer adjectives, like in other words, the word is longer, 2 or 3 syllables, we usually use the adverb more or less in front of the main adjective. My new boss is more positive than my last boss, because positiver sounds kind of silly. That girl is less negative than she used to be. Than is also another word in English that signals we're comparing. It sounds a lot like the word then, but then is spelled with an E and relates to time. Than is showing, hey, here's choices, right? Here's 2 different things we're comparing, contrasting, that kind of idea. Now, there are irregular comparative adjectives, which are basically just weird adjectives that don't follow the rules, unfortunately, which English is full of these things. So good becomes better in its comparative form. So this pizza place is better than the one down the street. We can't say gooder, it's not really a word. Well can also become better, but this is in case of like well versus like as in the idea of healthy. He was pretty sick for a while, but he is better now. Bad becomes worse in its comparative form. Like that computer virus is worse than the last one we had. Like just like we don't say badder. Little becomes less in its comparative form. You get less chips in the bag than you used to. We don't say you get littler chips in the bag than you used to. And it's just kind of one of those things that have developed right over the years. I don't know that there's any logical reason for these. They just kind of are Unfortunately, things you have to memorize. Now, there are some irregular comparative adjectives that have two different formats depending on the meaning you're trying to get across. So, old can become elder in its comparative format if you're referring to members of the same family. She is the elder sister. Okay. So she might not be old, right? You could be talking about somebody who's 8, but she's the eldest so far, or the elder sister compared to the 6-year-old. Old can become older if you're just talking about a general population. And I don't know why it's particularly different. And I also don't know why Google is so difficult. Okay. I'm sorry. I got really far in today and I thought, ooh, I've mastered the Google feng shui and got it to do what I want it to do. But I sadly am not yet a Google Ninja master. One more dream crushed. All right, let me try and find it here. Sorry, guys. No, there we are. Okay, so if I say my new coworker is older than me, I would never say elder in that sense. And it's different than the phrase that person is one of the elders, because there it's not being used as an adjective, it's a noun describing somebody who's older and respected in a community. So that's the noun version, not the adjective. So it's not related. Okay. Far has two different comparative forms. It can become farther or further. Some people use these interchangeably, they just don't worry about it. Some people have distinct ideas about how they should get used. So it's kind of a very controversial thing. I was trying to track this down on the internet to see which one was the correct way, but I really never got an answer because it's just different people have different opinions. So some people that say that we should only use farther if you have a specific distance. So if I wanted to say Bronson is 120 kilometers farther west than Wisteria on that highway. And these same people then feel that further should be used either figuratively or for non-specific distances. The blueberry patch is further into the meadow than the raspberry bushes. Some people just use farther for either. So it's really up to you, that particular one. Superlative adjectives. I always want to say superlative adjectives when I see this, but no, it's superlative. We say it a little different. Now, superlative is when you're comparing more than two, like 3 or more things. In the regular format with the short one-syllable adjectives, we simply add est. So, for example, he is the tallest guy in the room. The moment you have more than two, you have to use the superlative type of adjective. If the adjective ended with a Y, we change the Y to I and we add est. Busiest, happiest, silliest, craziest. With longer adjectives, 2 and 3 syllable adjectives, we add the word most or least. I should say least here. This is the most delicious cake I have ever eaten. Um, that dress is the most expensive one in the shop. And at this point, you can see we've dropped the word than because now this one is like the best. We don't have to compare in that sense. Um, I'm not sure why, but we don't. Superlative adjectives with irregular formats, because of course English has to have irregular formats. Less becomes least. That is the least expensive car on the lot. Bad becomes worst. That is the worst fish I have ever eaten. Good and well both become best. So good as in like performance and well as in health both become the phrase best. He was the best in his class at woodworking. She is the best she has ever been since the surgery. Okay. Occasionally, yeah, there is. These ones are the, sorry, the same ones that were weird in comparative are weird in superlative. Hang on a sec. Sorry, guys, my voice was drying up there for a second. Okay, so old becomes oldest if it's just general population. He is the oldest guy in the class. Old can become eldest if you're talking about a family. She is the eldest of all the sisters. He is the eldest of the brothers. Far can become farthest or furthest, right? And again, some people would say farthest should only be used with specific distances, and furthest is with non-specific, and some people don't care. To me, furthest almost has a sort of a British feel to it. I think I would almost always use farthest, but again, that's up to you because as far as I can tell, there's no definite right or wrong for that one. Okay, so we're looking at lesson 7 here. We're talking about reading strategies. Back in lesson 3, we had to fill in a thought bubble with different forms of reading. And I wonder, did you include textbooks? Because believe it or not, writers of textbooks do their best to make the reading of their pages simple. And yet, often students struggle with finding information they need, which I understand because most textbooks are very busy. There's a lot going on. To me, it's like being on the corner of a street and there's like 6 or 7 different people shouting at you, trying to get your attention. You don't know where to look first. So there are certain features that most writers of textbooks include to help students, but often these features are not appreciated because they're misunderstood. For example, look at all the details in the sample of a textbook page on page 12 in your unit. I'm going to look up that in a minute. The amount of information that they have crammed onto one page can make you tired before you even begin reading. It doesn't help that the type is so small either. One way to help yourself understand a textbook better is to check out its text features. So we're going to do a little tiny video here about text features. This video doesn't have words, I don't think, but it really shows the text features in a really nice, cute fashion, I think. It kind of uses the Men in Black here. All right, let me see if I can get this going. Hang on. It says, welcome 00 student, execute retinal scan. Access granted. Today's mission. Hello, class. Your mission for today is to apply everything you know of non-fiction text features. Okay, I have to end that, otherwise you won't be able to hear me. Before you start, let's take a closer look at some of the non-fiction text features, which went too fast. I apologize. What are some non-fiction text features? And in the little bubbles, they're showing you some of the different examples of things that you might find in your nonfiction. Nonfiction just means like informational text, like a science textbook or a history textbook. So first of all, you might have a glossary. A glossary is kind of like a little mini dictionary. It's usually at the end of a textbook, but sometimes you might see like little mini glossaries at the end of a chapter or even right on a page. Fonts and bold print words. Highlighting certain words to bring attention to them. These words are usually found in the glossary. Pictures with captions. Drawings or photographs that have a written explanation of what is happening in the picture. So here, the Men in Black are prepared for the next mission. I just kind of explain it because sometimes it's obvious, but other times it's not so obvious. Charts, graphs, and maps are visuals that are used to explain a topic in more detail with visuals, right? A lot of times visuals are easier for us to understand than a bunch of numbers are. Titles, headings, and subheadings. These are located before you read a chapter or a section. They provide clues to the information you're getting ready to read. They'll also be distributed throughout that chapter. Index is an alphabetical list of the names or the subjects with page numbers. It's usually located in the back. Table of contents. This is a list of the chapters or the headings in a nonfiction book. It provides clues on what each chapter is about. So if you're looking for something specific, you can just turn right to that. Layout. how information is displayed on the page. It includes white space, the placement of pictures, charts, maps, etc. So here's a little layout of a photo of a plant. Bibliography. Bibliography is a list of other books and websites to find more information about the subject you're reading about. I'm going to stop it there for a second. Hang on. It's also usually the sources that they used to get their information. So if you were reading a book about the stars and they put, I don't know, a book by NASA, for example, in the bibliography, that means the author probably read all or part of that book to get some of their information. So then if you wanted to read more, you could go to that source as well. Okay, hang on a sec. Oh, and of course, yes, also internet links, which are tricky because sometimes they'll go dead on you. All right. Okay. So now we're going to use all those features to help us understand things that we are reading. Okay. So assignment 20 is going to be understanding a textbook for 15 marks. And we're going to be talking about skimming and scanning search techniques for a little bit first. And it comes up again in assignment 21. Most people consider skimming and scanning search techniques like a way to search rather than a reading strategy, like a type of way of thinking. However, when reading large volumes of information, they may be a lot more practical than reading. For example, you might be searching for specific information or looking for clues or reviewing information. So skimming is a way to quickly identify the main ideas of a text. When you read a newspaper or a textbook, you're not usually reading it word for word. It kind of depends what you're looking for. If you're trying to answer some questions, you don't necessarily read every single bit in there. Instead, you're kind of skimming the text. Skimming is when you're reading at a speed about 3 or 4 times faster than normal reading. Usually you're skipping a lot of the little words like to, the, you're looking for the big content words like photosynthesis, Armageddon, genocide, big words that are kind of like a clue of, hey, here's the answer to this concept. People often skim when they have a lot of information to read in a small amount of time. Use skimming if you want to see if an article might be of interest to your research, or if you've got like a whole chapter and you're trying to find the answer to one question, you don't want to read every single, all of 20 pages. You just kind of want to look for the key part on your question. There are many strategies that can be used when people are skimming. Some people read the first and last paragraphs using the headings and summaries as they move down the page or screen. Some people might read the title and the subtitles, the subheadings, and look at the illustrations. Some people read the first sentence of every paragraph. Remember how we've talked about the first sentence of a paragraph should tell you what the paragraph is about? So that can give you a good hint as to whether the question that you're looking for could be in that paragraph. This is really useful if you're seeking specific information rather than just reading for comprehension. Skimming also works really well when you're trying to find specific dates, names, places, and it can be used to review graphs, tables, or charts. Scanning is a technique you often use if you're looking up a number in the telephone book or a word in a dictionary. You're searching for a key word or a key idea. So you're not really even reading it that. It's more like you've got a picture in your head of that word and you're just flipping through all the words really quickly looking for a match. And once you find a match, then you'd stop and read that area more deeply to see if that's what you were looking for. Okay. It's usually when you're concentrating on finding a very specific answer. You're moving your eyes quickly down the page, looking for specific words, specific phrases. It's also used when you're first looking through a resource to try and determine whether it will answer your questions, right? Sometimes a book may have a title that sounds like it's going to be what you want. And then when you start to open it, you realize, oh, like this is either way too hard or they're really looking at, history of the latter half of the century. And I was looking for history in the earlier part of the century, whatever, right? Once you've scanned this document or your book or whatever, you might go back and then skim it. They're using the words very separately, but really people tend to skim and scan at the same time, to be honest, I think anyways. When scanning, look for the author's use of organizing features such as numbers, letters, steps, or words like first, second, next. Look for words that are bold-faced or in italics or in a different font size, style, or color. That's usually a key way that they show important information. Occasionally, an author might put a keyword or idea in the margin, sometimes like in a big colored box. So for textbooks in particular, the table of contents can help you find information more quickly. That would be where you'd go first. But sometimes when you get there, it depends on how they wrote the chapter. Sometimes they write chapters and it's like a whole bunch of information at once. Sometimes they write a chapter and there's a bunch of subheadings. So use the subheadings if they're there, but if they're not there, you don't want to have to read every single word. The glossary can help you find definitions. The index can help you locate a certain topic within the textbook. And different types of graphics can give you a visual representation of what the text is saying. And they often will take it a little step further and show you more information, right? Margin notes and bolded text can help emphasize important points. So if you're skimming a text, here's an example. Think of a word or a phrase you're looking for. Like, let's say you're looking for the word indigenous and you want the word woman. And I'm using this one specifically because we're going to do something like this in our assignment, okay? So I don't want to read every single bit of this. I'm looking for the word indigenous and I'm looking for the word woman. And it's a capital I, so that should be pretty easy to see. Again, I'm not reading everything. I'm just looking through. Now, I don't see women, but I do see sisters, wives, and daughters, so that might be something. Oh, and there's the word indigenous. Okay, so I'm going to back up and start reading here. Sisters, wives, and daughters of merchants, military officers, and political officials were involved in the trade. Likewise, indigenous people were active participants in the transatlantic market economy, and the French relied on indigenous men and women to hunt fur-bearing animals and to process the furs. And then it goes on and talks about how washing the furs, scraping off the dirt, flesh, and blood, and stretching them over wood frames to dry was women's work in indigenous society. So those, well, let me do this. Yeah, it will. Okay. Those little sections, if I was looking for stuff on indigenous and women for my question, those would help me answer my question. I didn't put a question here, probably should have. Okay. So this is a really useful tool when you're doing content area courses, things like history, science, social studies, business, right? So we're going to be practicing this skill. So in your unit, there is a mock textbook page that follows. You do not want to sit down and read the whole thing. I mean, you can if you want to, but if you look around the page, there's all sorts of little informational texts that explain things above. And here are the questions they're going to answer. Now, I found this page almost unreadable in the unit. It's so small and it's kind of blurry and it's just hard to read. So what I would do is I would do a Google search and put how to read a textbook page fun facts and pull up the same version. And I've checked recently, it's still there as far as I can tell. And then you can make it bigger if you want to, and it's much easier to read. Okay, so that's what I would do. Um, before we go on, I'm just going to kind of read the questions so you have an idea of what kind of things we're looking for, okay? A, what is the first thing that catches your attention? There is no wrong answer there. Whatever catches your attention, that's it. What is a subheader? Who wrote the alphabet versus the goddess? What is the main idea of this page? What are some of the techniques used on the page to draw your attention to certain areas? What will you usually find at the beginning of most chapters? Name 3 examples of typography. What is the purpose of typography? What types of lists do writers and publishers use? What do students need to know about supplemental information? And why are textbooks frequently color-coded? Okay, so if you go in your text, you may see something like this, and you can see This is almost impossible to do. I'm gonna just kind of quickly show you. I made a bigger version here, and here's the bottom half, so that if you're having trouble or you don't have access to the internet, you can use these to help you answer the questions. We do have access to the internet, so I'm going to kind of go there just to show you. Okay, so here you can see, and I can just go up here, make it a little bigger, and then I can see things, okay? And so there's the initial textbook page, and then all around the edge are a whole bunch of explanations on what the different textbook features are. So if you just look at this really quickly, I can see like here's a heading right here. It's telling you what the main idea of the page or of the chapter is. And then you've got little subheadings that are a little bit darker, but not as big. Here, they've got some activities and they've color coded them to show that they're a little bit different in the subheading. Here's a little sidebar or what they sometimes call supplemental info. They've color coded it to help you find your way around. Figures. Figures is a fancy book word for a graphic. So if it says figure 512, it means in chapter 5, this is the 12th picture. And number 1 could have been a graph, and number 2 might have been a map, and number 3 might have been a photograph. And they just kind of label them all. I have no idea why. It probably helps when they're creating the book, but that is one of the things that you can do. Here's an internet connection that you could go down there for more information. Here is a footer. Footer is some information at the bottom of a page. Usually it repeats. And this is telling you chapter 5, chapter 5. So if you're flipping through like a giant 300, 400 page textbook, you can easily find it because you don't have to just find the exact right page where chapter 5 starts. All the pages that are chapter 5 will say it, for example. Let me think here, what else? There might be little lists in the text or beside the text. Here they've put vocabulary, which we have also sometimes talked about as glossary. Typography comes in 3 different forms. Typography is just a fancy word for font, right? Font can be bold, darker. It can be italicized where it's slanted. Roman is just the normal one, underlined. It could be colored, or there could be a little icon or a symbol. Like here, they've got like a little, I think it's an icon of a pencil. And that's just kind of after a while, you'd know, oh, hey, here's something I need to do. Let's see. Poll boxes. Poll boxes are similar to sidebars. They often have the following content, things like connections, features, strategies, profiles. Uh, so, oh, pre-reading. Before, let's see, hang on a second. Have they phrased that something's weird there. Often students can read the objective or the headers or the subheaders to kind of get an overall sense of what they're reading. And it kind of depends what kind of reader you are. A lot of people like to have the big picture and then fill in the tiny details and kind of flesh the picture out. Other people like to see all the little details and then build the big picture for themselves. So it sort of depends on what kind of how you think. Neither one is right or wrong. It's just kind of showing you that for those who like to see the outline or the big picture first, looking at these textbook features can really help you. Okay, where are we at here? Okay, if I don't get through everything today, we'll just kind of pick it up on Monday. Okay. So, okay. So now, hang on a second, I'm gonna head back. You would go through and answer these questions, okay? There's usually room right in your book to do it. And this is the one area where it does not matter to me. Well, I'm not going to say that. If you need to, you can write it out on line page, but you're also welcome if you're a neat writer, to write it right next to the question, okay? And that's all it is. It's just talking about all the different things, and the answers are right on the page. If you just read these little things all around, they will tell you the answers, okay? I think the only really tough one is the idea of typography, but we talked about that. We talked about the examples and what is the purpose? Why do we have different types of typology? What does it do? Okay. Okay, assignment 21 is very, very, very similar, okay? This is about textbook features, which we're kind of talking about. You can select any subject that interests you, science, geography, history, Aboriginal studies, math, doesn't matter. Choose a textbook at your learning center. If you don't have a learning center near you, not every community does, you could also check out the elementary school, right? Especially grades 7 and 8, they're bound to have some sort of textbooks, okay? I will show you a little bit later. Yeah, there's also textbooks online that you can find too, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. And then you use the following little worksheet or table to fill in and record the answers. It's called textbook feature analysis. So features are just those little things we were talking about, right? The headings, the subheadings. You may not know what all the features on the worksheet are, but your task is to find the features. And if you get stuck, go back to our helping page here and it should tell you, okay? This is just to get you used to interacting with and knowing how to use the features. Please note, Jimmy Comes Home is not really a textbook, it's a novel. So it doesn't have any of the features we're looking for, so you can't really use it for this particular assignment, okay? If you don't have access to physical copies of textbooks, you can often find PDF copies online. You can enter textbook PDF finder. You can also go to publisher's site like Pearson, for example, is a Canadian publisher. And a lot of times they may have textbooks available for viewing there. There are some that want money, but there's lots of free ones too. Hang on a sec. Okay, so I grabbed one online and I'll show you that in a minute. Here are the questions you need to answer. And occasionally I get people saying, well, what textbook? Any textbook. It does not matter. You can use any textbook and your answers will just be based on that particular textbook. It really doesn't change things. What is the title of the textbook? And you would put that right here. Who are the authors? Be careful with that, right? There may be multiple authors, but if you have one word like Pearson, that's not the author, that's who published that particular book. For an author, you'd be looking for, David Grisham or Katie Birch or whatever, right? How many pages does the textbook have? Look to the back and find it. What is the name of the publisher? That will often be either right on the front cover at the bottom or on the edge of the spine. Or if you flip into the first page or two, it should say, Gage Publishers, Pearson Publishers, whatever type of publisher it is. What is the SBN? So I get this answered two ways. Some people explain to me what an ISBN is. Some people give me the number. I will happily take either one. That's fine. But I will give you a little hint. An ISBN is called an international, what is it? Something, something book number. Every single book has its own specific number. It used to be a 10-digit number. Now it's a 13-digit number. And it is usually on the back. It might also be on your cover page. So where is it located on your book? Take a look and see. Create a citation. A citation is when you are writing an essay or whatever, and you want to quote somebody else, and you tell people where you got the information from. It's called a citation or citing something. So they're showing you how to do it because you probably have to do it later on if you're going on to college. You put the name of the author first, then the title, then the publisher's location, then the name of the publisher, and then the date of publication. So for example, Percy Gillian, How to Be an Internet Teacher, Toronto, Gage Publishers 2024, okay? And people get used to that format, right? So that's why you always use the exact same format. So people always know, okay, the author's the very first thing. The publisher is going to be right before the date. Where is the table of contents? Take a look. You can tell me the page. You can tell me more general information. How is the information in the table of contents organized? Again, you tell me, how did they organize it? How many chapters does this textbook have? Where is the indexed? How is this information organized? They mean the index information, okay? Does this textbook have any other sections at the end of the book besides the index? List them. We've talked about some different textbooks may have different sections, right? Math textbooks might have a bunch of lists of formulas. A science textbook might have the periodic elements. Who knows, right? So whatever textbook you're looking at, take a look at the back. What else do they have besides the index? Oh, hang on a second. I'm going to go back to, this is one you can use if you want to. You're welcome to. It is a grade 9 textbook. And here's the cover. Make it a little bit smaller so you can see it better. And then I would just go through and find my information. Oh, look, here's my authors right there. Here's my publisher, right? Oh my goodness. These all have different jobs involved with this. Look, here's my ISBNs. So I could use this PDF to help me answer all those questions, okay? Okay, so, and this is why we're doing these assignments together, because they're all really, really similar. And they're nice, quick assignments. You can whip through about 3 or 4 assignments really quickly on this particular one, once you get the hang of it. Okay, so here we're back to talking about skimming and scanning for information again. This is another 15-mark one. Okay. For this one, you can't use any textbook. They've included like 4 pages from a Canadian textbook that they want you to use to answer the following questions. They want you to practice not reading every single word in the page, but doing the following, practicing your skimming and scanning. So part A wants you to skim over the whole passage to gain an overall impression or main idea. Remember, skimming is quickly glancing over the passage to determine the general content of the passage. In one sentence, write down what you think the passage is about. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But so for this part, you might be looking at the headings, the subheadings. You might look at the first sentence in every paragraph, and just get the kind of the overall gist of what they're going to be talking about in this section. Okay. Remember, this is worth 5 marks. So you want to make a nice long sentence that explains your idea with lots of details, or you're not going to get all 5 marks. If you just wrote, it's about Canadian history, no, that's worth 1 mark. I'm not going to give you a lot of marks for that, okay? Remember that compound and complex sentences are a great way to include a lot of details in one sentence. So here are some more examples of sentences that are too vague. These pages are about history. Whose, where, what topic? These pages are about Canadian history. Well, that's a little tiny bit better, but what part, right? Canada's been around for a long time. These pages are about families. Families where? What time period? What about families? So here, the person is really just naming the topic. They're just giving me 1 or 2 words. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the main idea. In other words, what's the big idea they're telling us about the topic? So if you're putting just 1 word there, then you're not on the right track, right? We're looking for something more complicated than that. So here are some examples of, here's the vague topic is in red for no, don't do it. And then here is the great one in green, like, yeah, do this, okay? So these pages are about plants. Yep, not telling me enough information. These pages are about how to grow vegetables in the backyard in Canada. Okay, great. That's a detailed main idea. These pages are about restaurants. Oh my goodness, that's really vague. There's so much I could be saying about restaurants. These pages are about Restaurants in the Thunder Bay area that accommodate people with food allergies and intolerances. Yes, much better. That's a detailed main idea. So I don't have time to read all of this, but you can see I could read the first sentence. The history of parenting is often remembered with a nostalgic view and an assumption that it was better than now. Family history in Canada. To gain a better understanding of Canadian families today, it is necessary to study the changes that they have undergone through history. Aboriginal families. Family history in Canada began with the hunter-gatherer societies of the Aboriginal peoples. I'm just reading the subheadings and the first sentence. After 1500 BCE, many groups of Aboriginals began to give up their nomadic way of life. The arrival of the Europeans in North America between 1500 and 1700 meant the end of their former way of life for many Aboriginal groups. The marriages were considered temporary, and when the fur traders returned to Europe, their Aboriginal wives and children would often return to their original families. See, the Aboriginal peoples had a very different sense of family than the Europeans, whose family were very male dominated. They placed a high value on their children and raised them with care. Looking at the changes in the Aboriginal people's family life from the arrival of the Europeans to the present time, from a systems perspective, there is a dramatic evidence of how a change in one part of the system can affect the entire system. Okay, so now a lot of that was about Aboriginal families, but now we're switching. Now we're talking about European families. In the 1600s and 1700s, marriage and family patterns in Canada varied greatly. Okay. Schooling was not compulsory for children during this time. Difficult conditions that existed at the time, such as poor sanitation, disease, inadequate housing, and a lack of medical knowledge, led to high infant mortality rates, as well as shorter lifespans for adults. Children went out to work at a young age, since families needed their wages in order to survive. I haven't read the whole thing, and if I wanted to read a little more, I could. But from what I've read so far, I could probably explain a complicated, interesting, detailed sentence about what this overall passage is about. Okay. So 5 marks, you want it to be a nice, detailed sentence. Oh, here's some examples. Use a long sentence, such as a compound or a complex one. A simple sentence might be history is awesome. It's not telling me enough. A compound sentence is when you join 2 smaller sentences together. History is awesome, and I would like to be a historical researcher someday. A complex sentence joins an independent sentence and a dependent sentence together. History is awesome because it brings to life the times and events of people living long ago and from different cultures around the world. See, it's still one sentence, but my goodness, this last one gives me so much more information than this first sentence. So this kind of sentence is what I'm looking for when I say write one sentence that's worth 5 marks. Okay, does that help? Make sense? Okay, assignment 22. Scheme. Oh yeah, this is still the same assignment, but now we're at the B section. So now you're going to have to look for very specific answers rather than just give me the main idea. B says, scan the passage to find the answers to the following questions. Write your answers in full sentences. So I know it's tempting to just write like a word or two, but please put it in a full sentence. So for example, what were the men and older boys responsible for? 2 means 2 marks. And I would say the men and the older boys were responsible for, and I would explain whatever the textbook had said. Point 3, give 3 reasons why Indigenous family relationships baffled Europeans. 3 marks. Okay, so there are reasons right in these textbook pages. You don't have to make anything up. You just have to find the sentence that explains it to you, okay? Why were the families of the early Indigenous people considered egalitarian? Okay, egalitarian is a big fancy word that just means that men and women were considered equals. So what was going on that had indigenous families, uh, why would they be considered egalitarian? And again, you don't have to think of an answer. You just look in the textbook and you will find the exact words that tell you what the answer is, okay? Why did European men often live with or marry indigenous women? And again, the answer is in those pages. You don't have to make anything up. So, yeah, I've shown those pages already. That's what you do to answer these questions. They may not leave you enough room in the unit to write it, so you may have to write it on lined pages. Um, my handwriting is pretty messy if I'm not really, really careful. And I have to write pretty big for it to be nice and neat and readable. So I know that I wouldn't be able to fit my handwriting in these spots. If you have the same characteristics to your handwriting, you may need to use lined paper or a computer in order to write those answers down so that they're legible. Okay. Remember that I have to be able to read the answer. Okay. Let's see what's next. Okay. This is assignment 23, visuals and informational texts. I'm trying to think if I have enough time to get through it. I think we do. This is worth 12 marks, okay? And there's basically two main questions. The part up top, I'm gonna read it and then I'll come back to the explanation. What kind of visual, for example, a graph such as a line graph, bar graph, or circle graph, do you think would best show the following employment data from Statistics Canada Labor Force Survey 2021? So hint, you're making this kind of visual in math class. I don't know if we need the hints. They just explained it. Sketch the type of visual you will use, okay? This is worth 5 marks. In 2021, approximately 6 million people were working in Ontario, of which 54% were male, 46% were female. 82% worked full-time, 18% worked part-time. 84% were employees, 16% were self-employed. It's interesting to me that they don't have employers there. Now, sometimes people get kind of mixed up on this question, and they think that sketch means just kind of like pretend to draw a graph. That's not what they mean, right? You can't just hand me something that looks like this or like this. You don't have to get out your ruler and a compass like in math class and make it absolutely perfect, but it does still need to be a proper graph with labels and numbers, identifying what the information is showing us. But you can do it on lined paper, for example. Not every type of graph is going to be able to show us the type of information that they're asking us to display. So for example, line graphs are not going to be able to show you all 6 different types. They just aren't. So here is an example of circle graphs. Here it's showing you the relationship of different musical preferences of students. This one is showing you the different types of foreign languages studied, maybe at a specific school or across the country. Here are bar graphs. Here they're showing different ways to show a bar graph, vertical, horizontal. This one is called stacked, which is a little bit tricky if you've never done it. Grouped, most people have done this kind of grouped things like favorite color. Here's the favorite colors for grade 1 class. Here's favorite color for a grade 2 class. And here's a favorite color for the grade 3 class. This is nice for making comparisons, right? Okay. Oh, one more thing is if you want to show a number like 36 in the graph, but there's no 36, 36 is pretty close to 35, which is halfway between 30 and 40. So I would just put a little line there and color that in to show. So here is a report and then some questions that they want to answer about it. Although really they're talking a lot about the visual, not just the report, okay? What type of visual is used here? Please do not tell me a picture. Picture is a really broad answer that includes a lot of different things. You could say things like a graph, a map, an ad, a chart, a table, a diagram, a photograph, or a drawing. Again, put it in a complete sentence. The type of visual used is, and you would tell me what it is. Why do you think this particular visual was chosen by the newspaper? Remember, somebody at the newspaper said, hey, this is a great visual to use because they could have shown a map to show people where the event was, or they could have used a graph to compare attendance levels, but instead they chose this particular visual. Why do you think they did that? So this is your opinion. I think that they chose this visual because, right? And you're going to tell me why you think so. And then this last question is the hardest question, right? Do you think this visual is effective in conveying information? This is worth 3 marks. A lot of people will just tell me, yes, it's effective, or no, it's not effective. That's not really what I'm looking for. That'll get you 1 mark. Okay. Why do you think it's effective? Is it adding information to the story? If so, what kind of information is it adding that the story doesn't? So in this case, you might want to read the news story and see what is it telling you that is different than what the visuals are telling you. Okay. And let me see here. I'm almost done. So here are some examples. Yes, I think the photograph is effective because, and you give me a reason. It shows us, explain what it shows us. It helps people picture, and you tell me what it pictures. It helps people understand. What do they understand? Words alone cannot explain. What is it telling us that the words can't tell us? There are all sorts of ways to explain that. You don't have to use all of these. These are just examples of sentences, the beginning of a sentence that you would explain. Okay. So on Monday, we're going to look at informational, or what I would call procedural writing. And this is writing that explains the steps involved and how to do something. We don't have time to do this, but if you want to take a look, there's an online example of procedural writing. This one is Vegetable and Flower Gardens, How to Start Your Seedlings. And it's a whole little article on step 1, do this, step 2, do that. And it's a great way to kind of have an idea in your head of how a procedural text would look, because we're going to be writing some on Monday. Okay. If you get a chance, take a look at some of those online. There's all sorts, and it will give you some ideas. So when we're writing, you've got plenty to draw from. Thank you so much for showing up, and I will see you guys on Monday.